Okay, so here we have the new affixes. Let's see how awesome they are. Reckless non-boss enemies without mana ignore 20% armor with their attacks, but their armor is reduced by 30%, and they take 10% increased arcane damage. What? So any trash mob that isn't inherently a magic caster, so I assume marksman, archer mobs still applies to this? But non-boss enemies without mana ignore 20% armor with their attack. So all trash that isn't caster is gonna do ignore 20% armor. And isn't that, I don't know how tanks work since Dragonflight, but isn't that kind of a discrepancy with armor value? Some tanks having way more armor, ergo being way more punished by this. Whereas something like a Brewmaster wouldn't get as punished. But also in turn though, since it's a Kiss-Curse type of affix, those mobs will have their armor reduced by 30%, so all non-casters will do more damage on them, but they also take 10% increased arcane damage, which is the part that kind of gets me weirded out, because not every single caster has arcane damage. It should just be 10% increased magical damage if it's supposed to be on par with the other ones. This is the cursed affix. It seems super weird, but then again, first iteration, tuning, blah blah blah, hopefully feedback gets to it. It's a little bit weird. Then we have Thorned. Non-boss enemies without mana inflict... Do they hate casters? Okay, non-boss enemies without mana inflict physical damage to their attackers when attacked, but take 10% increased holy and shadow damage. Like, I don't get the point of these when it's 10% increased shadow and holy damage, because not every class does that, so it's a fucking affix that excludes half the player base. I'm gonna assume that gets changed though. I'm gonna assume they're gonna make that into magical damage, or that perhaps magical damage dealt also deals holy and shadow damage as a proc or something. I'm gonna assume that, because it'd be extremely weird if it went live with just doing increased holy, shadow, and arcane damage. But you never know. You never know. Then we have Atuned. Non-boss enemies with mana inflict 20%. Oh, so this is for casters then. Non-boss enemies with mana inflict 20% increased magic damage, but take 10% increased nature damage. And 30% increased damage from bleed effects. And then we have Focus. Non-boss enemies with mana have 30% increased haste. What? The non-boss enemies with mana have 30% increased haste, but take 10% increased frost and fire damage. Okay, I'm gonna read up a little bit more here before I give my 2 cents on that whole weirdness. Because if you check what they continued to write down here, is these affixes will not affect every creature. So is it just when one of these affixes is active, it's a certain amount of packs in a dungeon that has these affixes? Which makes it even more weird, because the affix itself is restrictive in who can get it. Like, you're either going to be a caster or a non-caster. Those are the first rules. But then added on top of that, they have the rule of just some mobs will have these. Then what the fuck's the point? All of it seems kind of pointless. But then the other issue is...
Stankie.
The other issue is, are you going to have these on a rotation? So it's kind of like, oh, 1 week fucking classes that, deal physical damage and arcane damage will be really good. Oh, but the following week we have Thorned, so then you want to have Ret Paladins and Shadow Priests and Warlock. Oh, but next week you get Atuned, so then you want fucking Arms Warrior for the bleed effects and Feral Druids. And the next week on Focus you want a Frostfire Mage. Like, if they go live like this... That's super weird. Like, the only thing this is gonna do is minimize the meta for high keys. Unless they change it to, deal more magic, deal more physical. But that just feels weird again, because it's some mobs will do more damage and take more damage. So isn't that just tuning? Couldn't the very same mobs without the affix just be tuned up accordingly? I don't know, it's a weird affix. I think it's just meant not all creatures, as in only ones without mana based on which affix it is in. But these affixes are hella strange. Yeah. I really think they're trying to prevent a meta comp from forming, but this isn't that. This is doing the exact opposite. Well, yes and no, but it's gonna form meta teams per week. And it's gonna make key pushing even more annoying, and especially if you're... Say that you play Fire Mage, or Frost Mage, whatever. Or Warlock. Let's say you play Warlock. Fuck it. And you're playing, you have a key, you have a good week with the rest of the affixes, but it's fucking reckless on it. So you're just, you know, your tank is gonna take more damage, and you're not gonna do more damage as a Warlock. So that week is gonna be less optimal for a Warlock to push. You know, we're talking really high keys now. So that just excludes them for that week. So previously, when players are pushing, you know, really high keys, you know, the really good players, they have something called push weeks, which is this week has really easy affixes, so we're able to push keys higher. And that is based on, you know, the old affixes we had. This is just gonna make those windows even slimmer, because like I said, you can have a week that has, you have fucking... Sanguine, well, I hate Sanguine, or, you know, something, if it was Entangling, maybe you have Entangling and Reckless, and you'd be like, fuck yeah, Entangling is a piece of cake, but Reckless means I suck, and it'd be better if I was on a mage. Like, it's very weird. If they keep it like this, they'll force weird meta around weeks and affixes, and if they change it to always be just physical damage, bleeds, and magical damage, then it's just a non-existent affix. Like, I'm really, don't get me wrong, I'm ecstatic that they're trying out new things, that they're trying out Kiss-Curse type of abilities, or type of affixes, because that's way more fun than just getting cursed. But, that being said, you want to feel the kiss, you know, if you're getting kissed, you want to feel it. This is not that. This is like moving through a crowd and occasionally you just feel something lick the side of your face. You know, it's there, but you don't really notice it. I mean, a good Kiss-Curse affix was the one, I forget what it's called, but it was in Shadowlands, where when you were done with the affix, you'd get the mana reg, and you dealt more damage. Was it Pride? I think it was Pride. Like, that was way more impactful. Prideful, yeah, I was close. Fitting month. That one was really fun to play with, occasionally. I mean, it could be really bothersome, but you know, you were cursed by the affix and you had to deal with that shit. But when once you were done with the prideful ad, boom, you get mega buffed, and it changed the way you approach the dungeon. I get it, what they're saying, they don't want you to do that. They want the difficulty of a dungeon to be in the difficulty itself, not in the affix. But I don't think prideful made keys harder. You just had to approach them differently, and it gave players the opportunity to play around that affix by, you know, doing pulls like, okay, we really want prideful to proc here, so we're gonna do a little off meta pull to make sure we proc the affix here so we can do better later. All of that is possible due to the affix, and you would never do it without that. That's the type of affix I like. Or in BFA, the Season 4 affix, was it Encrypted? No, not Encrypted. The one where it spawned the special mobs and you could teleport, you know, gateway around the map, so you could completely nuke rogues out of orbit. You didn't need their shroud. You could do whatever skips and inventive pulls you wanted. That's fun as an affix, but going into a pack and occasionally that pack will deal 20% more fist damage, or ignore 20% of your tank's armor, but you deal 20% more fist damage. That's not fun. Like, what are you gonna do with that? Ah, yes, my Storm Strike hit for 25k instead of 20. Ugh. Yeah, that's gonna be fun. I don't know. Like that they're trying stuff out. Status quo is death. Like, always try stuff out, but this ain't it. This is not it for me. Big pass. No, but it's just gonna get weird because people always go for meta min-maxing. You know, if MDI peeps or pro M plus players do that because it allows them to push a 29 instead of a 28, then other players are gonna look at it and be like, I need that 30% bleed damage on a few packs or I won't be able to do this key. Yes. Like if we go back to the topic of Awaken being fun, it was fun because it allowed players to be creative. Did you need to be? No. For most players you didn't. You just interacted with the affix and it was fun. But for the higher end players, they started to get creative with it. And of course other people copy that and follow. But you won't, regardless of gimmicky stuff or whatever the 0.5% does, you're not going to be able to do those keys without doing weird shenanigans and really smart plays and game breaking stuff. That's never going to change, affix or not. So, you know, they can design it around them or not. They're still going to do things that other players aren't.